But we want to be respectful of everybody's time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me say to start that those of you who are here are going to be really happy that you made time to be here this evening. Yeah, no pressure. So this is our annual, well, sometimes it happens more than once, but this is our Irwin Warren Lecture in Advertising and Digital Media. Pat Muchler, who I guess isn't able to join us, who is an alum out of what the ISC program grew out of, established this lecture series a number of years ago. And I remember talking to Pat, he wanted to do something, and we were talking about possibilities. And I said, well, you know, we've got this really great PR series that we do, but we don't really have anything comparable that's more advertising oriented. And he's like, oh, that's it, that's perfect. And so Irwin Warren, who this lecture series is named for, was one of the big names at the agency. So, sorry, I should back this up. Pat Muchler worked for Johnson & Johnson through most of his career, so maybe it's good he's not here, given competition. But Irwin Warren was one of the senior advertising people at one of Johnson & Johnson's lead advertising agencies. And Pat had a great deal of respect for him, and so we talked about whether you want to name the series after you, and he's like, oh, no. He said, I want to do something in honor and in memory of Irwin Warren. So we've had this series for several years. We've had quite a variety of speakers who joined us for it, but when we were talking this year about what we can possibly do, I will admit very selfishly, I said, well, you know what? There's this great person from Procter & Gamble who talks to our sales promotion and sponsorship class pretty often about the work that Procter & Gamble does with the Olympics. And we haven't had that class for a couple of semesters. I think it would be great to have Phil Duncan come and give the Irwin Warren lecture. And fortunately, he said yes. So, first of all, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Beth Barnes, and I'm a faculty member in the Department of Integrated Strategic Communication. We have most of our faculty here tonight, saying we can have a faculty meeting. They're mostly sitting right over here, so I'm sure you know many of them. But a big thank you to our dean, Jennifer Greer, and our department chair, Chike Anyebunam, for their leadership, and to Amy Brooks, who took care of all the logistics to get this organized, working with Phil's great assistant, Holshu. And then Chris Moore, our tech genius who helped piece everything up so it would work today, which is great. But Phil's going to tell you a little bit about himself, but he is a UK alum himself, actually out of the College of Design. But we were just reminiscing. We connected through really a cold message I sent him through LinkedIn a number of years ago.
Yes.
We were doing a big focus on design on campus, and so we brought him in to speak, and he happened to mention during those remarks his involvement with the Olympics, and my ISC ears pricked up immediately. And ever since then, I've basically forced him to come to campus. But he's also the father of a UK alum as well. So I'm going to let him tell you a little bit more about himself, but as I said at the outset, I think you're going to be really glad that you're here, because not only are we going to hear some about P&G's work with the Olympics, including the strangeness of the last few games, but also some of the other really interesting stuff that Procter & Gamble is doing. I was talking earlier today to one of my suite mates, Erin Hester. See, I've almost called you doctor again already. She will be very shortly. But I was saying, it's just always so fascinating to me, because I think about the Procter & Gamble I grew up kind of knowing, and it is not the same Procter & Gamble anymore, certainly not from the standpoint of this kind of work. So we're going to get to hear about some really, really great stuff going on just up the road a little ways in Cincinnati. So, Phil Duncan.
Great. Thank you, Beth. You got me on, Chris? Am I good? Okay. So, good evening. Thanks for coming. I know it's a glorious spring day, and you could have chosen a lot of places to be. And it's really a privilege. Every time I come back to campus, it obviously brings back a flood of amazing memories to me, but also the privilege I have to maybe, hopefully inspire others that they too can land a role that is quite interesting, that allows them to see the world, to leverage the education that the Spine University provided me as a great foundation, and then go on and do some amazing things that, again, I have been incredibly privileged to be able to go on and do. I'm not a terribly formal presenter, so as I go through, if there's something that you want to raise your hand about, I would love this to be a bit more interactive. I know that can be difficult at times, but I love the kind of the engagement aspect throughout. So I'll be going at a relatively good clip. I tried to bring a lot of things just to illustrate exactly what Beth was saying. Kind of how P&G has kind of gone through I'll call it a bit of a crisis over the course of the past 15 years, and really put ourselves back on a trajectory of growth, and what we did to accomplish that, and some lessons learned, certainly in the role that I've been in at P&G for now 14 years. I've been the Chief Design Officer at P&G, so I've seen a lot. But again, it's great to be back on campus, and thanks for coming out tonight. And I wouldn't be, so like, yes, that's me in 1987. I actually worked at the admissions office and gave tours of campus to prospective students on then a double-decker blue bus that used to run around campus. And occasionally, my friends and I were known to maybe augment the script that we were given with a few more interesting and colorful stories, so I apologize to any of you that might have heard those. No, I'm kidding. But as the Chief Design Officer at P&G, I get a lot of like, what do you do all day? And I'll come and explain a lot of that, more through the work that our team, our marketing team, and our R&D team in particular that I work very closely with. And you can see some of the things, everything from thinking about our core product and package offering, are they really being superior versus competition? But also really step changing our approach to innovation. Thinking about how we could be more agile, how we could be integrating data more proficiently. I'll come and talk about all these things. I do lead the company's efforts. Ironically, in my position, I've come to lead the company's efforts in two key areas where we integrate innovation in our brand stories, which is the Consumer Electronics Show, or CES, and also, as Beth mentioned, the Olympics. Which has been on a really, obviously, very interesting journey over the course of the past at least 2 executions, for sure. So all that is fair game, and I hope to, again, show you some things, hopefully, about some lessons learned that we've been on an interesting journey over the course of the past, particularly decade to 15 years. So there's the updated picture. A little bit about P&G. I know many of you probably know the company, but this is awkward to do it this way. I hate sitting behind the desk, but I'll do it for a little bit. Obviously, we have a rich heritage. 1837, we were founded. Over 100,000 employees. A lot of nationalities, a lot of big brands. You'll be shocked probably as I play a video here about the number of brands that are probably in your house right now that P&G makes and produces. We touch almost 5 billion consumers a day, which is pretty astounding when you think about the responsibility within that, as well as the opportunity within that. And roughly we're about a 76 billion in sales, which means we have some of our businesses are bigger, brands are bigger than many businesses. We have, I think our biggest brands are Pampers and Tide, and they exceed 15 billion in sales. So those are some pretty big numbers, and when you visit one of our manufacturing sites, you fully appreciate how big the organization is. But we did start out very humbly in Cincinnati, Ohio, making candles and soap from pig lard. Interestingly, Mr. Gamble and Mr. Procter married twin sisters. So it is women who have ruled and brought P&G together. But I'm going to play a little bit more contemporary version, this being our first company store, but here is our company in a slightly different light. So let's hope the sound works. Yeah. All right, so maybe to put a slightly more contemporary face on a company than just Tide and Charmin and Crest, not that I'm not terribly proud of those businesses, and I think particularly during the pandemic, I have a mortgage payment or two that was driven by Charmin sales, which were a little crazy during the pandemic, obviously. But you know, it's been an interesting journey as we have evolved about how we think about brand building and how we think about innovation. Because there was a long time when, well, this is an interesting chart, when particularly 7 or 8 years, maybe 10, 12 years ago, a lot of direct-to-consumer brands were starting to come at P&G and compete with us very effectively, I might add. And we began to see that, frankly, our approach to both innovation and brand building, we like to say, needed to be constructively disrupted. Meaning it wasn't just going to be disrupted for the sake of being disrupted, but we needed to be constructive about how we really reassessed our business growth, because frankly, this were our results. My career at P&G has been somewhat interesting. I started there after getting my MBA. Ironically, I was a design person for several years, worked in the industry for a little while, went back and got my MBA, joined P&G in brand management for about 4 or 5 years, left into the agency life and went back 14 years ago to be the chief design officer. And my joke is that the blue dot represents when I went back to P&G. So it took a while for my presence to be felt, obviously, by virtue of the stock price. But what was interesting too is I would define these periods of our company in kind of not unusual constructs as many organizations go through. For a long time, frankly, we're just trying to do the same things, only do them, better or harder or work longer hours. And you can see, frankly, from even just a stock price standpoint, that wasn't necessarily materializing in much. We went through a rationalizing exercise in what should be our core portfolio, and we started down a very intentional strategic path. And we kind of saw and understood that P&G was in the business of touching and improving people's everyday life. So while a lot of our portfolio might have been, some brands around the world that you might use once a week, or that there was a high-ticket ring item, but then you wouldn't use it throughout the year, or what have you, we began to really understand that our business was really driven by brands and products that really touch people every single day, and that they invited into their home or their life on a very personal basis. So that began to inform a lot of what businesses should we be in and what businesses should we get out of, which actually allows the organization to really focus on frankly, building what really matters and has the largest growth potential. So went through a phase what I would call portfolio focus. And I'm really going to talk a lot about then what were we doing during that phase to prepare ourselves for growth today. I'm going to talk about it through 2 lenses. One in kind of the innovation arena, and then another in the brand building. And those aren't obviously 2 different, constructs. There's a high degree of Venn diagram language overlap between that, but there was some very explicit activity that we did that generated from each of those spaces that permeated our entire organization. And today, I'm proud to say the stock price is somewhere around 160 or so. So, not saying that we've got it all figured out, but that's quite a difference versus 66 when I started. So I will take a small amount of credit for that. But I do think it's really important, when you find yourself, and all of you will at some point in your career, thinking about, I need to kind of step back from the everyday aspect and ask ourselves, are we headed in the right direction? Do we have a sound strategy for getting us out of the business situation that we're in? And this is a diagram that we use a lot. It's called the Integrated Growth Strategy, and it outlines 5 key components that we felt were really critical for us to get back to the right kind of growth. I mentioned the aspect about portfolio and where performance drives everyday choice. Our brands are not the cheapest brands, we know that, but our brands, we believe, are highly differentiated and highly effective, and when performance matters to the consumer, they'll be willing to pay that slight premium for a P&G brand versus a store brand or what have you. I'll talk about how we define superiority to win with consumers here in a minute. We talk a lot about productivity in the company, which means cutting out the excess things that we don't need so that we can fuel that which is working. And then I already kind of touched on this notion around constructive disruption, being kind of habitually unsatisfied with today's results so that you can really reimagine and rethink your approaches, not to throw everything out, that's the constructive part, but to be disruptive. Our whole premise is we compete in about 10 different major product categories. We would rather be the ones that are clipping at our own heels rather than leave that space open for competition. And then finally, you know, it's a crazy number of people who apply to P&G globally every year. And I think it's something like 500,000 people. And so obviously a very small percent get in. So and we are typically a promote from within organization. So we've got to do a lot to make sure that we're bringing in the right people, that we're building great careers for them, and they're finding it, you know, rewarding to work at the company. So obviously talent management becomes a big part of the organization. So getting these to work effectively together is critical. And then I mentioned the vectors of superiority piece. This is our other big kind of strategy money slide, if you will. We took a deep dive into the data behind our business and what markets were growing with what businesses or categories or brands, and dissected that to understand what was really underneath it. And when we saw that we had superiority with product, package, communications, or advertising plus, if you will, retail, if you will, retail superiority, whether that's in a store or online, and obviously building value. And you'll hear me today talk about customers. That's my language for retailers. I'll try to remember, because we say customers, we say consumers and customers. When I say customer, that's a retailer like, you know, Procter or what have you. But I'll try to catch myself during the presentation. So when we see that at least 3 of these 5 vectors are superior versus competition as measured, our business is growing. 4, it's really differentiated and growing. You get all 5, and it's a home run. Difficult to do because you can't invest equally across everything all the time. You have to make choices. That's what a strategy is called. But when our businesses were superior versus competition across this, they were growing at a hefty or a nice clip. The plus signs are not insignificant in between that, because no consumer looks at a brand and says, oh, how is its package? How is its product? How did I like, they think about it holistically as an experience. And anymore, we're seeing a lot of things that fall in the seams between this that become really critical in some of our businesses. For example, in beauty, influencers are huge right now, right? It's not so much what we say about a brand or business, it's about what they might say and what they might post. So how we use an influencer to talk and celebrate about one of our businesses has a huge impact on many of our brands in beauty. So each of our businesses have gone into this kind of 5-vector model and added a few things or emphasized one over another, but this is a core part of, again, setting our foundation when we understood where our businesses were growing and frankly, when our businesses were not, or why our business was relatively flat. Getting into this kind of diagnostic was really critical. The D does not stand for Duncan, the D stands for design. Although, no, never mind. But design kind of sits, I have to give a little shout out to my design team, right? We sit at kind of this intersection between brand and R&D, which is a fabulous place to sit. Those organizations in our company are huge. We have about 450 designers, whereas R&D, there's about 15,000, and the same over in the marketing side. So I joke when the leaders of those 2 organizations say, design really holds our 2 organizations together. I'm like, holds you 30,000 with my 500, but okay, let's do it, right? Nor would I want necessarily an organization of 17,000 designers or creative people. I'm not sure what we would get done during the day, but anyway. So my orientation tends to be from this vantage point, which is why I wanted to bring this slide. So I mentioned that I was going to kind of go at this from 2 angles. Innovating on how we innovate from the innovation side or R&D side, and then also on the brand building side. And again, not mutually exclusive constructs, but I wanted to kind of illustrate how we've been, again, constructively disrupting from within kind of the core components that really do drive our business results. So again, these were some of the key points that we did as we took an R&D and innovation lens towards what were some of the things we then needed to deliver. How were we going to deliver against that integrated growth strategy through the lens of innovation? And so things that were maybe not apparent to obviously everyone here, because this was about some of the foils that we saw, but things like taking a more forward-looking approach. Our approach to, developing a prototype heretofore would have taken years to develop it. I mean, one of the most complex manufacturing things in our company is to making a diaper. It is like launching a rocket to the moon. I mean, I kid you not. But when the design team came along and said, well, we can do some prototyping this afternoon on some sewing machines in the back room. I mean, our R&D community was apoplectic about that. Like, well, how could you possibly make a prototype in, 4 hours? But we needed to get more experimental. We needed to take a more forward-looking stance. We embraced the notion of lean innovation. And if there's a book you should read, read anything about lean innovation from Eric Ries. So that was a wonderful book that our company really took to task, and to understand what were the premises of lean innovation, which was about kind of rapid prototyping, quick experimentation to the consumer, utilization of data to make better informed decisions about like kind of A/B testing and what should then be the next evolution of that said prototype, and do so in small funded gates. We didn't give them huge amount of cash and all the time in the world. They said, we'll see you in a month with your learning. What's your learning, what's your learning, what's your learning? The lean innovation approach, we called the program GrowthWorks at P&G. If you ever read anything about GrowthWorks at P&G, it was all about lean innovation. So I could not impress upon you enough, this was a huge kind of shift in how we went about reorienting what our approach to innovation was. So I'm going to show you a couple. I'm going to demonstrate it a little bit through some examples. On a few of these, I'll try to talk over them. On some of their videos, I'm just going to let them run. First up is, so I'll talk over this one. This is the Olay Skin Advisor. So I'll let it run. It's pretty self-evident as to what it is. So this was a technology where you could take a selfie of your face, and through the use of artificial intelligence, thousands and thousands and thousands of people utilizing this, this, if you will, application, we could, in theory, understand and compare that with our mounds of R&D data on skin and skin health and skin aging, and then use the information from these selfies as a means of connecting you to the best Olay regimen to give you the best skin that you could possibly have. Pretty crazy, right? That's not toilet paper anymore. So we really are looking at integrating data and technology and being more forward-looking, obviously, in terms of that's I think one of the best manifestations of how we're looking at really re-examining what value we can bring to the consumer, not just the goop in a jar. This one also is pretty extraordinary. It's called Opte. I think there's no sound, yes. So this device is, think of it, the nickname for it became like a beauty wand. But so when you think about trying to get an overall kind of perfect complexion on your face or neck or arms or whatever, a lot of people use this kind of technology. Only about 5 to 7% of your skin is actually, if you will, imperfect. The rest of your skin is beautiful and fine. And it's just those pigmentation spots that are slightly different than what's around it. But many women, and yes, men, and whatever, would cover their entire face to kind of get that perfect look. Whoops, that was a fast video. Did I press the button? No? Okay, I didn't. Anyway, Opte takes thousands of pictures every second of your skin and lays down like a micro, like a pigmentation, if you will, and only covers about 4% of your skin surface to give you an overall, even skin look. It's pretty phenomenal when you think about also the overall kind of skin benefits and the embedded technologies that are within that. So again, really rethinking what our beauty business would stand for, and the combination of both, I'll call it the liquid and the goop, as well as the technology and the knowledge that we were passing along to women, particularly, and men who were using the device. And this scanning element is now advancing for us all the way through now to diagnostics, moving into things like skin cancers. It's pretty incredible, the kind of aperture that it's giving us in this space. The last disruptive kind of technology that I'll introduce is EC30. Obviously, we're, like I mentioned earlier, one of our big businesses is Tide, and another one is Downy. These are some of the biggest detergent brands, whatever. This brand is called EC30, or Environmentally Clean for 2030. So one of our amazing R&D innovators had a thought, literally visited a state fair, and saw how they turned liquids into fiber at the cotton candy machine. So he thought, well, that could be kind of interesting. I wonder if we could spin liquid into a fiber that would allow us to have a lot of flexibility in the inherent chemistry makeup that we bring to the end product. Meaning, I'm not a huge scientist, obviously, by the way, I'm butchering the explanation, but there are a lot of things that you cannot literally put in a liquid bottle, or they would combust, or they would not mix well. I mean, think about, kind of in a layman's term, my term, like your salad dressing, it separates, or whatever, or worse yet, obviously, it could combust. But this allows us to actually lay down multiple layers of different types of technologies and deliver for you, the specific kind of request or a profile of a product that would be uniquely designed for any one individual or designed for a cross-platform opportunity. So this is a product that actually you can use. We're now making that, believe it or not, shampoo, toilet cleaner, laundry, hand wash, and now I'll play the video. I think it will play with no sound. But the breakthrough nature of how we're baking in sustainability to this solution is incredible. Yes, it is. You can go online. It started out it's DTC, but you can go on. I think it is EC30 under the website. And you can just Google EC30 and it will come up, and you can sign up. You can get a first promo pack that gets you a couple of samples of the portfolio. It's been actually, thank you. So we've seen some really terrific results so far. We're kind of exceeding our sales goals. We actually, I was a big proponent of celebrating it at the Consumer Electronics Show, and I was told I couldn't because we can't make enough right now. It's a pretty complicated process to turn the liquids into fibers, but we're figuring it out. And they're really magical. They're kind of unique to hold in your hand, and then turn them into a liquid ever with the introduction of water, and the fragrance is amazing. So anyway. So that was kind of the innovation side, and then I'll step over to the brand building side a little bit. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, and this is arguably a side that I'm very close to in the organization in terms of accountability and responsibility, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what were some of the things that I think are going to be the same, and what are the things that I think are going to disrupt in the future. And of course, when you look down this side, things like consumer preference, brand superiority, advertising, data for insight mining, brands in stores, superior products and packages all, seemingly make sense. But I also think that there's a huge array of how we're really augmenting that look out of how we go about brand building. And one of them is actually around behaviors and how we're using data and sensors to actually enable, and frankly, with permission, asking people to help us with their actual tracked behaviors in terms of how they go about purchasing things, how they clean their home, how do they really behave versus what they say. So unfortunately, in things like sustainability, a lot of people will say, oh yeah, like I'm all in, I want everything to be super sustainable, but then they go on the store and they actually don't purchase that, right? So we've been, or if you go into the laundry room and people say, oh yeah, I always do this first and then that first, and actually they don't, right? So we're really trying to get a lot better at not just asking the consumer about their preference, but literally get into what, understanding through technologies, what are their actual behaviors. I mentioned this point around, embedding sustainability into our brand superiority. Anymore, everything that we are doing comes through the lens of what is the sustainable and better solution. I think there will be no ads in the future. There will not be ads because people are annoyed by ads. But if I go onto a gaming platform and I see, and I'll show you a couple of these things, and I see Gillette authentically show up in that environment and have something that is of meaning to offer me, maybe I can get some sort of a badge that I can then go on and, play in my other metaverse that whatever. Okay, but I'm interested in talking to you, Gillette, in that environment, but you're not forcing me with some ad that I'm required to watch. So, and I'll show you a little bit about how we're stepping into the metaverse world here in a second too. I mentioned this, data for insight, and the plethora of data that's coming at us, there is incredible. But how you use that through things like, again, and leverage things like artificial intelligence to help you get to actual insights that you can operate against is probably one of the trickiest things that we see coming, but it also is hugely fascinating. Obviously we will always, and we'll sell in stores, but in some of our businesses, in some markets, China, for example, some of our businesses are selling online at 60, 65, 70% of their sales are now all online. And I think that's all going to go deeper. I think we're going to see the intersection, and we've already seen it in social commerce. We do live stream selling, literally from our offices in China. And tens of thousands of people are tuning in to these things, which was kind of shocking to me. Like, who would want to listen to me yak on and on about, bounty or whatever, but it's kind of an incredible construct happening. And then also moving into things like, I mentioned social commerce, but the metaverse. I think this is only going to be another intersection that will be quite exciting for us to step into. We're learning our way in there, and I'll show you how I had to learn about this in a rather urgent way as CES went up in smoke because of COVID, and yet we still wanted to attract our people to come and learn about our innovation. So we stepped into the metaverse and built an entire experience on a gaming platform, a multiplayer platform. And it was a huge learning curve for me and others, but we've since obviously used it in things like the Olympics and whatever when we couldn't get people to come to us because of COVID. But now we see it as the way in which we're going to be really intersecting with the future of commerce and people and what have you. So quite exciting. And then I do think this is all going to lead into, I do want a superior product, and I do want a superior package that has to be at the foundation. But anymore, I'm leaning on the experience. What's the experience that I have with your business and brand? If I'm really important, having a second life for your product and package is important to me, how are you enabling me to do that? Understanding how different people, like opinion leaders, are influencing, certain things. Who are they, and how are they a part of your proposition? So, all sorts of interesting things are coming into this experience set. I'll try to show you a few, and a couple of our businesses, ironically enough, like the oral care category, but they've been killing it. And I think part of their inspiration came. We also own a business called Braun, which is a fabulous business out of Germany. It's like great design stuff and always been super great about integrating technology and whatnot. And so they're fortunate enough, Oral-B, to have a big connection to our studios there. But as they began to see that people were getting more and more attentive to, if I can get data about this category, about how things are going on in my life, why can't I get data from this category and this device that I'm holding in the context of delivering a superior experience? So enter what has been one of the biggest growth areas of our company, believe it or not, which is the power toothbrush. And not just like, okay, what can this thing do? So it's incredible now, the amount of technology that is embedded in this power toothbrush. Let's see, it should play. There we go. I had to get the beep in, I guess. So I think it just has some cool music. I think I'll talk. There's the aesthetic piece, which I put first. So it has a position detection technology inside of it. It knows where you're brushing in your mouth, and it helps you understand. We know that a 2-minute brush is the ideal brush. So it will help you understand your brushing routine. And if you're using too much pressure on your teeth around right now, it has different types of brushing modes based upon the outcome that you want. And it will track your brushing over time on your smartphone. So even as you're brushing, it knows, again, it helps you know how to distribute your brushing if you don't need to. And then it does some lights up and says, great job, and then you get a nice message on your smartphone. There's the take it with you. So we're not in paper towel land anymore, right? Pretty amazing stuff when you think about the amount of embedded technology in it, not just in terms of how the brush performs. It is a super cool performing brush. I mean, all these other kind of experiential things we're putting with it are great, but at the end of the day, it better brush really, really well. That's a $200 toothbrush. And honestly, we were like, oh, we'll see. We are now making what will probably be a $400 toothbrush because this thing is going like crazy. And I think it's because it's bringing an enhanced experience. And once you're in, you're in. I don't want to go back to, not necessarily being able to know how do I brush my teeth well. Can I send this on to my dentist so that he or she knows that I'm doing a good job? Can I send this to my insurance company that lets me know so I can get a discount on my insurance? Can I track my kids to see how they have been brushing their teeth? I mean, this is where this starts to unlock a lot of value creation for us and really exciting. But on the flip side, we can't walk away from the good old manual toothbrush. We've got to be innovating here. So introduce Click.
This is Oral-B Click, a new eco-friendly toothbrush. You hold on to the durable handle and only replace the head. Saving up to 60% in plastic waste. If everyone would switch, we'd save the weight of 8 Eiffel Towers per year. If that's not reason enough, here's more. The bristles are no longer just round. Some are shaped like an X. That alone can improve plaque removal up to 30%. With an evolved crisscross arrangement, surrounded by a new outer row for better reach, the click performs like no other manual toothbrush. The click fit joint connects the head to a stunning, built-to-last handle, made out of high-end compounds and perfectly balanced to always face up, accompanied by a sleek magnetic mount to keep your brush always in reach. Oral-B Click, an innovative toothbrush system that clicks with your style, your teeth, and the environment.
Okay, so back to the 5 vectors of superiority. Product, I think it's pretty great. Package, I'll give you that, you can see it a lot, right? Sustainability, communications, value. This thing, that's not a $1.99 manual toothbrush. But that has a ton of innovation in it. And again, from an experience standpoint, everything little from it balances, keeps the head from tipping over on the yucky counter, to I can stick it to a magnetic thing on the on my counter so that it's always within reach, reminding me to use it, if you will. When I think about experience and those points in between the superior product, superior package, those are the kinds of things that I think really enhances the overall experience that we're really striving to build and create with our consumers. Okay, so now something really different. So this is Pampers in China. So the China mom has become one of the most discerning mothers in the world, and no less, and particularly in baby care. Everything from scent to texture to you name it can drive a lot of either positive momentum for your business or brand or negative. And so we were introducing, we understood that product feel was a big driver and cue of superiority for our China moms. So we came up with a new technology called silk technology that felt like silk. And we really thought about how do we introduce this product to the consumer. And so we wanted to first start by integrating kind of a global sense and sensibility into the advertising in China. So we went out to various illustrators and did beautiful, like really beautiful, Istanbul, we went to Marrakesh, we went to Japan to have illustrators help us to depict this kind of, if you will, new silk technology and what does silk mean in their, and interpret it for their market. We then took a lot of these illustrations, and so this is kind of the package laid out flat. And so you're looking at a Pampers premium package in China, which I don't think that looks anything like a diapers package here in the States, right? But this is obviously introducing a super premium, product to the marketplace, and in a hugely appealing way. We brought it into the product design work, and then we really thought magically about how to introduce it in a way that opinion leaders, again, going back to everything I mentioned before, from what we call them KOLs, or key opinion leaders, influencers, what would get people talking. Talkability is huge. So what would get people talking about this product, and why not introduce it at Shanghai Fashion Week? Everything from having a runway show, product experience booth, live streaming. I think the live streaming caught something like, 240 million people in the first hour. Kind of incredible. So here's a little video that shows. But obviously going back to really rethinking brand building and putting experience at the heart of it, in addition to obviously core product superiority, package superiority, the vectors of superiority aspect. I'm almost at the end. I'll do this and the craziness of the Olympics, but about 5 years ago, we kind of sat down as a company. We'd always gone out to the Consumer Electronics Show, but never exhibited. So I got this crazy call to say, Phil, I think we should go. Why don't you run the program and see what we should do, right? So we put together together this idea around the Life Lab, which was about both connecting innovation, and yet we're touching people's everyday lives. We introduced a lot of great technology there, some of which I shared in some of the videos, and delivered like kind of unbelievable results. I mean impressions around the world. Kind of crazy just from this one venue. So we felt like, wow, this is a really great way for us to think about how to launch innovation. It becomes part of our, going back to the disruptive innovation, finding venues where we could tell our story. It was really fantastic. We took our own innovators out to Las Vegas, where like a lot of other companies would hire Las Vegas talent to like do this with their stuff. We took our own innovators, like our own R&D people, whatever, and the press went bonkers about it. Like, oh my God, I'm like, you made this? Like, it's you? You're the one? So they were really fascinated by it in terms of going back to the uniqueness of your own storytelling. This is decisions we were making as a company, like how do we authentically show up and represent ourselves. Then COVID happened. And suddenly this great venue where we launched innovation was seemingly taken away from us. And this is where we went into this world. Yeah, so we built that visible world in the virtual world. So here is Gillette talking about their latest razor, the exfoliating razor. You can hop on a hoverboard. Generated something like 3 billion views. We had people spending 30 minutes with us in the Metasphere, or the Life Lab metaverse, which was unheard of for us. Like, people don't spend but like a minute and a half on a brand website, or maybe 2 minutes, or maybe 5, right? And so suddenly all this started hitting us like, wow, we can tell really meaningful stories in this. We can engage and connect with consumers in very deep ways. And yet we also have a responsibility to, what is that experience they're having when they join us in the metaverse? And so this has been a really fabulous but incredibly challenging kind of project space for me to step into. I've never been faced with how do you create a story where you start with an endless 3-dimensional world around you and then you have to start building. But it's been super fascinating, and one that I've enjoyed because I've deployed it with this. So we've been a part of and this is where Beth found me several years ago, but we've been a part of the Olympic movement ever since London. And so, as a company, and kind of people say, well, why would you get engaged with the Olympics? And, clearly we're a big company with a lot of markets around the world. And in that environment, performance matters. And if there's one thing maybe you've taken away from what I react about is, performance matters for us and our brands, right? So there was an interesting fit. And so we began, I've had the privilege of being at each of these experiences, and we really focus on supporting families and athletes, because when families would go to the Olympics, they have no real mechanism for getting together. There's no really forum for them to come together as a family, watch what's happening with their child, son or daughter. And yet that was a really natural place where we're all about families. We know how to support families. We do so at the home. So we built these kind of family home experiences that became honestly a huge hit with the athletes and their families, because For the athlete, it meant that their family was well taken care of and they could go compete, not to worry about their family. Obviously for their families, they're often in a foreign country, they don't have a familiar sense of how to get around and connect. I mean, sadly, before many would meet in like bars to watch their, kids. Not that that's necessarily bad, but like it's not the best environment to hang out in as a family, right? So it's been a huge privilege for us, so we were typically in a planning cycle at least two to 3 years out for any one Olympic Games. So I literally was in Paris last week for the 2024 Olympics, starting to plan for that. So we enter into Tokyo, right? We'd already begun to site select and whatnot. Also placement, and then COVID happens, right? And it was an unbelievable challenge for us. And then the games got delayed a year. We were watching any of that, which caused us kind of just massive things to deal with. But we went back to our roots and said, why are we in this game in the first place? And it really was to celebrate families and athletes. So how can we genuinely do that? So I always play these. These are amazing pieces of film.
Your whole life, you've done things I could have never imagined doing.
Things almost no one in the world can do.
But I'm proud of you for something else.
I'm proud of you for doing the things that we could all be doing.
The things you do, not for yourself, but for others.
The things you do every day.
Things that matter.
The impact you have on the world around you.
And I can't wait to see what you do next.
So when we enter into these, and we've entered into this game, we realize that we're really part of the fabric of these families' lives. And then we also understand how the athlete uses the Olympics as a mechanism for not only their sport and for their achieving something that they've worked so tirelessly for so many years to accomplish, but they also use it as a springboard into the future of their life, their livelihood. And so when Tokyo was delayed a year, many athletes could not afford, we're staring down debt, we're staring down the loss of a platform that would have allowed them to hopefully, grab future endorsements, whatever the case may be. So we really stuck to our supporting athletes and families even during, really challenging times. So in addition, we use the Olympics to celebrate the principles and values of our company. What you may not have acknowledged, I doubt you would have, but all the podiums in Tokyo were made of recycled plastic, 90% of which was plastic from our detergent bottles. We did a huge program with the retailer called Aeon, where people could bring in their plastic bottles and we recycled them and made all the podiums for Tokyo. We had a huge and beautiful but sustainable installation ready to go that very few people saw, which was sad, heartbreaking. Where we also embedded things that mattered to our company, our values, and shared that with both retailers, customers, and consumers. We had integrated studio stages, the whole thing, even really terrific meeting rooms for in-depth to meet with people, what have you. Athletes, press, each with a different theme. Oops, and that's horribly me. And then nobody could go. Families really couldn't go. The athletes could, but our customers couldn't go. Our retailers couldn't go. So how do we bring our story to enter the metaverse again? So unfortunately, you have to listen to me in 3 dimensions or 2, whatever it is.
The Life Lab is an immersive experience to engage with partners and consumers to showcase some of our latest breakthrough brand innovations and important company initiatives, including our Olympic sponsorship.
We took Tokyo to them.
athletes, and then also engaging with future customers that were coming up in host markets. Then, Beijing, challenge to say the least. And so we went back to our roots and really just focused on supporting U.S. athletes and families in Park City. Because again, we couldn't even go. No one from the States was going. So we turned our attention to helping families actually watch their children compete in the middle of the night over in China in a really terrific environment that we built for them in Park City and partnered with the U.S. Olympic Committee to do that. And on to Paris. I've shared a lot. I try to hopefully illustrate through the work that we do. I come back to this slide as a kind of a key one that talks about how I think our business and our brands are really rethinking what are the elements that have been a key part of their success to date, but what are also the things that we need to be integrating in order to ensure our continued growth for the future. So, and with that, I think I've talked enough. And that's a goofy shot of me with some of my amazing colleagues at the end of a CES celebrating saying we finished this week. And so that's that. So I'm more than happy to take any and all questions. So. First one's always tough.
I'll ask the first one.
Sure.
So this whole idea of basically your gamification of brand interaction is just, it's something that was probably in the works prior to COVID, but then you just had to ramp it up like crazy to make up for not being able to interact with the consumer in direct spaces. So I'm not sure what my question is around this. Number one, I guess, what would our students need to do to prepare themselves to get into that world? Like, who's making the content?
Yeah.
And what types of people do you have in there? Because it's interactivity, it's game design, it's how we're going to position this product. So it kind of cuts across all the things we do at college, quite frankly. So I'm just curious, what do those teams look like? And
well, I think you asked and answered it really well, which is, first and foremost, it is overwhelming. It is overwhelming at first. I was really overwhelmed. Literally, I'm like, I don't know much about this space. But then you go back to, okay, what are the principles of telling a good story, right? Being consumer empathetic, celebrating what's unique about your product proposition, doing so in a way where the context makes sense of what's around it, right? And then baking in, I would say one of the biggest principles that we baked in when we first went to CES, for example, was what technology would allow us to. I told that little story about how we took our innovators out to CES the first couple of years. I didn't complete the back end of that because we chose what's called the Unreal Engine. It's a kind of a gaming and 3D space, whatever, where it's a multiplayer. And so, which means we could talk to people in the metaverse, where some people had built their universes, but you could only visit it, and it was very one way. You could visit ours, and you could talk to your avatar, if you will. All of us built avatars. All of us were there to talk to people, and half the time people would say, "Are you a bot? are you for real?" But what was really remarkable, and this is a big commitment of our company, is a very diverse organization. And so, the flavor of our people came out. Their accents from different countries, because we could all access the metaverse from wherever we were. Crazy that I was in the basement of my house, talking to people from all over, as you all have been too. So I think it was just a natural curiosity to keep your curiosity high, get in and learn. And yes, you're absolutely right. Well, these were cross-discipline teams. We did have a woman who came into the company and had a high veracity to learn, and frankly did a lot of stuff outside the company and brought her kind of AR, VR experience to the table and said, you know what, this is what I really want to do. So I'm like,
come here. So she and I and then built a team with IT, but traditional marketers, innovators. We have a group called Communications, but obviously we're thinking about it in a slightly different world in which it needs to live. The other big insight that I think is we're learning on. We're big time learning, no experts. But these worlds are built by other creators. And so we need to figure out how to enter their world, not the other way around. We had really good population of people that visited us, but that's a pull strategy when we really need to be kind of, it's a weird construct as a brand builder to say, you build our world. What would a Tide world look like, and what assets can we give you? Or oh wow, look, you built something really cool. Can we, join in with you? So I'm meandering off of your question, but it definitely was a cross-discipline team that had everything from IT, some new spaces like IT, experts in AR and VR, but then also kind of just really good traditional, people who are good at storytelling, expressing what a brand could be. And if you like a couple of those spaces, like imagining a world that was built, that you saw that the blue kind of lights and coming down from that one space on Oral-B, that was to signify the bristles of a toothbrush. We could never build that in the physical world, but building it in the virtual one was kind of easy and cool and fun. It does tend to be interesting. We have found the space to be really appealing for women creators who have been somewhat left out of the conversation in the male-driven advertising world. And so we find like really amazing women creators in this space. And we're trying to make sure that we have a real attention to that we are as diverse in front of the camera and behind the camera and the ecosystem around them. So that's been something that's been kind of joyous to see. So as a dad of 2 daughters.
It's interesting, the female creators also have been pushed out of the gaming world as well. And
Yes,
so,
it's a little harsher in that world as well.
Yeah.
So in the MR, mixed reality, virtual reality spaces, we're seeing a fair number, or maybe we're seeking them out with greater intent. But yeah, you're right. And I think gaming started out as a bit of, guys playing, war games in the basement, whatever. And but I think that's changing too. Maybe not fast enough, but it is. Yeah.
I really like hearing about the concept of disruptive innovation. The first time I heard a similar concept was 25, 30 years ago.
Oh,
It was Tom Peters, the management guru, was talking
Yeah,
about cannibalization, cannibalizing
Yes.
your own products. And
Yes.
if you're not doing that, then the competition will be doing. And at that time, it was almost something you couldn't believe. Why would I want to cannibalize my own products?
Yes.
So for the same reason you're suggesting, is if you're not doing so, somebody else will be right there behind you, so you almost have to. Well, my interest is how do you, from a management perspective, one, make sure that you're not trying to just do changes for the sake of change, that are actually constructive. 2, how do you keep that on a day-to-day basis where everybody stays motivated doing so and doesn't just get into a comfort level to keep innovating all the time?
Yeah.
Because that kind of, at first it's great, but after a while, as anything else, you get comfortable and it gets old, but it's a necessity.
Yes.
And the last part of that question is, when did you see that the success? I think you showed this at the very beginning, but did that coincide with this disruptive innovation? Did it come a little bit before it or a little bit after, or was right there at the same time?
I'm going to go backwards, I think, for your question. So, or your questions. We, during that flat period, halfway through that flat period, I would say we really recognized that just repeating the same thing over and over again was not changing the outcome. So part of the motivation was to say, okay, we're all kind of tired and we're all working really hard, but like, good grief, like this isn't going anywhere, right? This isn't changing the outcome. We're a pretty data-driven organization. So, and then
honestly, a few visionaries in our company, which is great. This was the head of R&D at the time, and she said, we need to be really reimagining how we go about innovating. And so I think those people who can be kind of vulnerable like that and then also lead a massive organization through that kind of change. I mentioned our embracing of lean innovation. So that took 2 years for us to both understand it and then bring enough people through what it meant and then set up the ecosystem effectively. So we had a central team that was supporting it, and then we kind of went out into the different business units and brought them along on this journey. So it took a good 2 years, if you will, to get that indoctrinated, I don't mean that in a negative way, but out into the organization and start the practice of it, because it was really foreign in so many of our businesses. I mean, I joke about the 2-year prototype in baby care, but I'm not that far off, right? So, and then suddenly what happened was the organization began to see we're an organization where results or you're envious of somebody else's results. So somebody who's doing something over there and suddenly it's working, that's wow, what? And then suddenly they go from talking about their prototypes that they're doing to like, no, we have 54 in-market experiments running right now. Like 54, like we used to do like 2 test markets. What do you mean 54 like experiments? So it had this kind of flywheel dynamic, but during that flat period, about halfway through, was when we kind of acknowledged that doing the same thing is not going to get a different outcome, and we really need to reimagine and introduce lean innovation. A couple of simple things. We do use the notion of S-curve. So this notion that there's this major amplification of a new innovation, and then we're really pretty good, again, data-driven, and when we see that the end of the S-curve of that technology is starting to happen, we're pretty good at cutting out the next group from that, if you will, that phase of the work, and saying you need to go now and invent the next S-curve. Sorry. And I think that puts 2 tensions into the organization. One, it puts a tension on the people that are working on the base business, and they can, if you look at our Tide business, it's been a market leader for decades, and that doesn't just happen, right? It's crazy how enthusiastic that team can get over driving foundational activity on Tide. But it always comes up with new innovation. I don't know if you saw in the videos, but one of the coolest programs that I was super proud about that won at virtual CES this past year was the work that we've been doing on Tide with NASA. So it's not just sending Tide into space to clean spacesuits. It's putting Tide in environments that are really resource constrained to figure out what is the future of cleaning and bringing that down to earth. So when there's no water that you could introduce, and so obviously there's a huge environmental aspect to that work. Anyway, so we use the S-curve a lot as a mechanism for understanding where innovation is on its journey, to then say, I need to there's always a team to continue, see how they can continue to push. But we acknowledge when it's starting to flatten out that we need to break off another team to reinvent and reimagine the next S-curve. I think that was most.
Yes.
Was there one more that I missed?
No, that was good, because I was trying to think kind of day-to-day to get rid of all the S-curve, as you're suggesting, it's more strategic. The moment you feel like it's time,
Yeah.
we invent. So
I think for
every day.
one of close to home, the designers have got to be really excited about doing product design. The metaverse might sound super sexy and interesting, or whatever, but I don't know. I look at that click design. That's a manual toothbrush, but the embedded technology in that is crazy amazing. And oh, by the way, 5 years ago, we probably couldn't have afforded to make it because we wouldn't have believed that someone would pay $20 for a manual toothbrush, right? So, but that's where our marketers and our designers, that idea of that removable head was in the design closet for about a decade. And finally, all the right things kind of emerge and connect, and that's when our teams get super excited about that. I've got to get people excited about being great, I can't wait to do the next package.
So what's the new challenge? Oh, sustainability, or how does it work in e-commerce? Or how do I close loop the choices of the materials that I'm putting in it so that I know that it's as environmentally safe and or whatever as I can. So I always think there's a new opportunity in those spaces, but you're right, it is up to, almost one of my jobs is to make sure that the design team is constantly excited equally about, I get to do the next toothbrush as I get to jump into the metaverse. So tricky, but I think when you get some opportunities like that and see these new innovations and technologies that you can integrate, it becomes a massive learning opportunity. I mean, who would have thought that your manual toothbrush could connect to your smartphone? I mean, imagine all the designers, the UX UI designers are suddenly now stepping into that environment to create that experience, and which is super cool. I don't know, at least I think it is. Yeah.
So you talked about how this Life Lab stuff was developed a lot during COVID as a response to people not being able to interact with each other and whatnot. So I was just interested, as COVID starts to wane, where do you see this virtual reality space going?
You should. It's funny. A company saw us a couple of years in a row out in Las Vegas, and I think the way they do this is they give you awards that then you'll speak in their publication, or you'll come speak. And I was just mentioning to Beth, I'm headed out to Las Vegas to speak at a conference called Exhibitors World, who gave us a bunch of accolades. And I think they're really worried that the whole world, everyone's going into the metaverse, right? I think it's going to be about a combination of both. And I don't know the quite answer, but for example, in that world, the beauty sphere execution that we did was stunning. We had influencers join with their avatars, and we made it a big thing, right? Our Gillette team kind of looked at it, and I'm like, I need people to put that razor on their skin, and no amount of gaming is going to make people feel that. So I do think that both worlds need to play together. But what's the saying? Fool me once, fool me twice, something. And this is now the third time when I've built a not insignificant physical experience that has gone up in smoke. Not completely. We did a really brilliant job of pivoting. But I will say, from the first year when COVID completely wiped out CES to last year, we made a call not to go in January. I made a very late and challenging, difficult, but right decision. Because that was right when Omicron was coming out, and it was crazy in January. And if there's one thing I won't do is risk our employees going for the sake of talking about razor blades, right? So it was December 27th, and CES started on January 6th, and we pulled the plug. And I was not a popular person at CES. Ironically, I'm on their board. So, I couldn't see, I couldn't look at myself in the mirror if one person got sick and then either had to stay out there, or worse yet, became really ill. I think it's going to be about both. And I think you have to look at what is the experience you're trying to create and say, can I realistically create that in a meaningful way? And I do believe that we will be able to. But I think everyone's kind of figuring out their appetite level for entering that world and spending time in it. How rewarding is it or not? And right now, it's a joy to be, here with people, right? But I do think the world's going to live in both. Sorry, just a quick pin on it. As we were going to this year's CES, coming off of the year before when we first built our first metaverse, I always like to say we were Meta cool before Meta changed their name, or Facebook changed their name. But I insisted, without a lot of grinning about it, that their businesses were not too happy. But I said, if you want to come to CES with us, you have to build a virtual experience. You have to support the virtual Life Lab in addition to the physical one. So when we collectively made the decision that it was not in the best interest of the company to go, thank God we had really terrific virtual experiences to use as our mechanism for launching the innovation without the physical one. So I think it proved that both pieces are going to be important going forward, and we'll find the right investment.
but it will be balanced, and it will probably move a little bit away from the physical and more into this environment as people become increasingly comfortable in it.
We have one more question over.
Yeah, hi.
Hi. So I kind of know we talked about the benefits of the metaverse, but I wondered what the cons you're expecting or have already seen.
It's a great question. I mean, I do think it's it can be intimidating for some people. It can be, again, like a lot of the product benefits that we're trying to communicate can seem a little, esoteric. It introduces people that may want to step into that world that that may have a different idea of what should be going on there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that happens in the physical world too, right? People if they want to share their opinions about something, they'll share their opinions about it. So I think it's about engagement more than anything, and who will be there, and can you support what you want to say about it. But I'm curious, do you see downsides? You've clearly been in this environment. What do you see?
I was kind of looking. I honestly didn't know much about the metaverse, so I was trying to research it when talking. But mostly just before coming to hear you, I haven't heard much about it at all.
Yeah.
So that's
I think
really
a lot of people.
I didn't know anything.
There's a lot of buzz about it, a lot.
Yeah.
But I'm shocked at the number of people that are reaching out and saying, "Oh, you guys built one. Can you come and talk to us?" I'm like, I built it out of sheer terror.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're just watching it. I mean, we just watch the statistics though. I mean, I mentioned it. They spent 25 minutes with us, and going through these experiences, and so that tells us that there's something intriguing about it. I do think the personal interaction piece can be a little bit tough, but the better technology gets, the more people get more comfortable in it. It's gonna keep going. It's the future. I mean, we have a lot of our businesses that are looking at metaverse worlds versus .coms and saying, why wouldn't I have that to talk about my brand versus build a website where it's a rather flat and not very engaging environment.
So do you think the interaction's a really big part of it?
Sure. I think it's why we hit it kind of so strongly when I did not expect it, but we made a smart call to build it on Unreal, which is multiplayer and allow people to talk to one another. And that was, at CES, people were like, "Oh my God, P&G, look what they've done." I'm like, okay, we cannot be the company that whatever, but I do think that is an important vital part for us, certainly, to tell our story and get to know our people and get to know our innovators. So call it a happy accident, but it was a smart call.
Thank you again so much, Phil.
Yeah, for sure, Beth. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for coming out.
Thank you all for coming. Thanks. Have a good evening.